Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. With me, as always, in the studio is my great friend, our producer, our guy in the sky, watching over everything, making sure this thing goes smooth, Mr. Dan the Man. Welcome, Dan the Man. Say hi to all the peeps out there.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well today.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome back if you're coming back, and if you're new, welcome. We are so glad you're here. We want this to be a refuge for you to find all the tools you need to have the best life possible on this daggone planet, and we have that in the 12-Step Fellowship Program. As our book says right in front of me, it says we have a way of living. It's a manner of living, and it works. And any problem you have in the world, we can usually find somebody in our groups who's had it, surmounted it, and they can give you the best solutions for it. So our goal here is to bring you any suggestions, tips, tools, techniques, things we can think of to help guide you on your own private journey of recovery. And this is something the entire world desperately needs, which is to recover from the madness of life out there right now. I was on the way here, I had to stop and get gasoline, and they now have these video screens in the gasoline tanks that have to sell you commercials because you can't have one moment of silence to yourself, God forbid. And I'm sitting there having jumped out of the car playing chill music, and suddenly I'm besieged by the commercials and the cars going by and the traffic and horns blaring and people talking at the pumps loud to talk over the commercials. And I'm just sitting there going, our world is damn noisy. This is ridiculous. And we all go through it with not even flinching, not even paying attention to it because it's normal. It's not normal. And we all need recovery to just get our crap together and pull away from that stuff. Couldn't tell you how happy I was to just finally get back in the car, Dan, and just close the damn door. Yeah. Just get that music going and just like, God, stop. Leave me alone. For 1 second, leave me alone, right? Like, turn off the cell phone, too. So, today's topic, you may have noticed from the placard, we want to talk to you about building your tribe and finding your peeps, and how this sense of community is the thing that will sustain you and help you to grow faster and longer and better than anything else we have available in life. Sure, you can sit at home, read a lot of books, you can go to workshops and take notes by yourself, but being challenged by your tribe and watching other people grow and being intrigued and interested by what they're doing and going and finding out what, teach me that. And nothing better in life. And as I said it in aftercare group this morning at the hospital, that literally you can go through anything in life if you have a tribe behind you. Literally anything. And I saw my friend Travis, who's been on this podcast, in one of the boxes nodding his head and doing this. So let's talk about this aspect of recovery today. Right now in America, as well as the world, but particularly in America, we have an epidemic of loneliness. It's incredible how badly, as a modern society that is supposedly so connected, we are so disconnected from each other. We also have an epidemic of Alzheimer's and dementia. And when they talk about how do we combat the natural effects of aging and what are some of the best things we can do to make sure we age in a healthy manner, guess what sits at the top of the list? Community. People who retire and go home and turn on Fox News or MSNBC and just sit there all day die very quickly. This is why they recommend probably don't quit your job right away. I was talking to my dentist hygienist yesterday about this, and she was talk about retirement, and I was like, yeah, I don't really want to retire right away because I just see people disengage. They're not being challenged. They're not getting out of the house. They're not meeting new people. And she agreed, and she was going to wait. I don't want to lose her too as my hygienist, but the point being is that sense of community we have in the 12-Step Fellowship groups, and it's a guaranteed retirement plan. There is no reason to grow older either lonely or sad and miserable as long as you have meetings to go to and people to sponsor and help and give rides to meetings and do service work. And this is a quality of 12-step recovery that the churches, I feel, have lost. Not saying that churches don't offer service work opportunities, but it doesn't seem to be baked into the system. And Dan and I always talk about how the 12 Steps provide a perfect program where everything that you need is right here. And part of that is service work and staying connected. So let's talk about that today and why it's so important. I remember I was in a training, particularly for addicts and alcoholics. Well, let's back up a little bit first and talk about the history just for a second. Bill Wilson was the original gangster alcoholic back in 1934 when he was suffering, and he's dying from this disease, and he's basically homeless. They're living with his wife's parents, and he can't stop drinking. He can't get a job. They're broke, and his whole life is crashing down. And he gets this business opportunity to go to Ohio, and I'll give you the short version. Things don't go well. He wants to drink. He knows from working at the hospital in New York for a little while, where he had gotten 6 months of recovery, that talking to other drunks helped him. That sense of connection, that sense of communication. Your really communication, particularly around your peeps, people that understand you and get you. You know, he could talk to his wife all he wanted to. It did not help him get sober, unfortunately. It doesn't work like that. So he reaches out, finds this other drunk, and this other drunk was not interested in talking to him because he was hungover and he didn't want some stranger, as he called a Yankee from New York, coming over and preaching at him. Well, they started talking, and 7 hours later, that sense of connection took place where I felt like I was talking to my own twin brother who had lived with me my whole life. That's the way Bill and Bob felt. And they looked at each other and said, "Do you want a drink?" The one said, "No, I couldn't possibly need a drink right now. I feel good." Because why? Because you get me. Because you understand. Because we have this. And I'm safe. And I can just let down all my walls and be me. And I ask everyone listening, how many of you actually have that in your life? And how many people in your life do you have that you can do that with? It's not really important that you have a big number there, but the ones you do have, they better be rock solid, meaning that when you're in really deep water and there's trouble flying, you can call them in a moment's notice, and you know they will sit still and be there for you and listen and not be distracted by 20 different things. That's rare in this world. So I was taught in a training a long time ago the particular importance of community and the tribe and the group for addicts and alcoholics. And I love analogies because, again, it paints pictures and it's easier to remember than just words. So this presenter said, imagine you're watching an old National Geographic special, you know, or one of the science films they showed you in high school. And imagine it's in Africa and they're panning the savannah and we're studying wildlife and they decide to study the gazelle. And you're watching the gazelles together in a herd, chewing on the grass and standing around with their tails flipping, getting the flies off them, and not much going on. That does not make for a very exciting film. So what do they always do? The camera pans off the gazelles and goes over here to the brush. And over here in the brush, guess what we have? 2 tigers that are looking at them as if they're looking over lunch and which one to pick out. What cut of meat do they want for lunch? And of course the music goes, duh, the tiger, blah, 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 right? Well, the tiger, being a smart predator, an apex predator, is not going to go after the herd. They have learned through hard lessons that when you attack the group, the power of the group has a lot of tools to repel it. For instance, that tiger might get a hoof in its mouth from all of them running together. That tiger is going to have difficulty picking one out of the herd because they're looking at a dozen tails flying and they're going to be blinded by that. And more than likely, perhaps the herd and anybody that might get bit would get away. So what they do, very smart predator. And I have to tell you, those of you that are alcoholic and addict, this is what our disease does because it's cunning. Remember, cunning, baffling, and powerful? This is how cunning it is. The tiger doesn't run at the one that it picks. So I missed a part of the story, but bear with me. Imagine there's one gazelle sitting over here on the grassy knoll. Meanwhile, the rest of the herd is down here in the valley. There's always one. That's the alcoholic addict thinking that I don't want to be with those people. I'm going to do my own thing. So if the tigers ran directly at that gazelle, because they've identified that one's easy, that's easy pickings, we're not going to go after the group. It will run right back into the group. They will lose it, and they probably won't get lunch. But they have learned. What they do is they run at it at an angle to push it further away from the group. And I, as an old-timer in recovery, have seen this technique with the disease occur on an expert level, where suddenly the newcomer who used to love us one day later hates us, who used to feel comfortable in the group, the next day is feeling like, well, I didn't really like what that one guy said last week, and they've got a resentment. And that resentment and that anger or that feeling different starts to pull them out to sea. And they get isolated out there where, of course, they're easy pickings for the tiger and or slash the disease. So watch this in your home group. You'll see this. You'll see people start to isolate. You'll see them. And, if they'll be honest, they'll tell you it's because somebody got on their nerves or somebody said something they didn't like or somebody looked at them cross-eyed. But a lot of times they won't even talk about it. They just suddenly start disappearing. And again, it's not the disease running at the herd. It's not the disease running at them to push them back towards us. It seems like it always pushes them away. And it's phenomenal how effective that is. So what is the moral of the story? The power is in the group. The power is in the group. The power is in the group. I heard that from my sponsor, Dr. Burns, many more times than I could count. And he was a bazillion years sober. So even a guy with that much time was saying, I know where my power source is. And I also know that when we alcoholics and addicts get away from our sponsors and get away from our supports, how quickly do we become sick? I defy anybody that's in our program who's listening, take a 3-day weekend by yourself and see if suddenly your own thinking starts to turn against you. See if you start manufacturing misery out of nothingness or starting to dwell on the negative rather than the positive. And then, after you do that, notice how if you spend the weekend at least staying in contact with your peeps, in contact with your tribe, and can to can with a string if that's what it takes, you don't have that effect. It's astounding how when we're alone, how quickly we get ill. I'll watch my patients have that effect, that they've got this group, the support group they love. I get patients that don't want to leave treatment. That's a rarity, but that's very common. They want to get extended, etc. But when they do finally have to leave, they take for granted that 3 hours in the morning that we had every day with meditation, readings, talk, and all that, education. And when that's gone, if they don't have a sponsor and a support group, they suddenly just go backwards very quickly. It's kind of like the old analogy, I've brought it before, that recovery is a down escalator that we're trying to walk up. The minute you stop walking, you start going, and you can see this at meetings, that people backsliding. So we need our tribe, we need our sense of community, and this was something that was very foreign to me, and it will be to you as well if you grew up in a dysfunctional family system or just a family where there was a lot of noise like I described at the gas pump. You will gravitate towards isolating, you will gravitate towards being on your own, not telling people your business, not trusting others easily, obviously. And now you come into recovery and we're saying, well, you got to get connected. You got to get connected. You got to get numbers. You got to call people. Now, here for all the sponsors out there, please take note of this because this one drives me crazy. I will get patients in group tell me their sponsors tell them to call 5 alcoholics a day. And my question when a sponsor gives that assignment is, I need you to go ask your sponsor if he did that or if he was capable of doing that. It is hard enough for a newcomer to call their sponsor every day. But to tell them to call 5 strangers a day, I think we're setting the bar a little high. Bill Wilson in our big book said frequent contact with each other is the bright spot of our lives. But today we have many different ways for frequent contact. And I would advise any sponsors out there for any assignments you're giving your newcomer, like write the first chapter, heard that stupid one, or write your story. Come on, man. Their brain is jelly from using alcohol and drugs, and the drugs have never been worse. Their brains are more damaged than ever compared to Bill Wilson's day. And what are you asking them to do? Stop that crap. Keep it simple. Meet me at the meeting. Let's talk. Let's begin your step work. Call me every day. But, be careful about these other fancy assignments you hear floated around. I'm not so sure we're making it harder for the newcomer to stick around. Now, I get it. We're trying to get them connected. But why don't you help them? And what a better thing I think would be like to walk your sponsee around yourself after the meeting. Hey, this is my sponsee, Joe. This is Tom. Tom, can you get your number? Okay, great. Hey, this is my sponsee, Mike. Can you get your number? Why don't you do that for your guy instead of leaving him out there on his own? That's your job, by the way, as a sponsor. But I get it. We're all trying to get connected. But as I said before, going back to the point, this was a foreign concept to me because I was very isolated from growing up in an alcoholic family. I had learned to fend for myself. One of the hallmarks of an alcoholic family system or a dysfunctional family system is that you're on your own to figure it out. And for many of y'all out there, I probably could prove this to you that maybe this was the case. How many of y'all had really good sex education in your family? or were you left on your own to figure it out? I mean, we got some clues, but we weren't really given like ABCs, like, okay, certainly about condoms and stuff. And, you know, I don't even know why I didn't get into serious trouble with that as a youngster. So again, like most things in recovery, it's new behavior. It just takes some time to learn. And we have more tools than ever to do it. So not a big fan of text, and I don't allow my sponsees to text me how they're doing. But I do think it's a side tool they can use for side things like, oh, I almost had a slip at work, but I'm okay. Or 911, that's especially effective on text. I do want to talk about our friend Polo, because Dan and I use the hell out of it, and so do I with most of my people. If you don't know about the Polo app, Marco Polo is an app where you can just leave a video message for someone, and it's not time. You can leave a long one or a short one, whatever it is, and they get to look at it at their convenience. I have to tell my sponsees, because I don't know many men who are, but I am not a phone guy. It just not in. I don't want to sit around carrying this thing and trying to navigate my life while I'm stuck to this thing going, And invariably what happens when you're doing that, you're not really paying attention to what they're saying. I will tell you that I will focus more if I have earbuds in and I'm doing dishes and I'm listening to a Polo. I am way more focused listening than I would be sitting there going, trying to do the dishes and stuff. So try it. It's a great asset. When Dan and I adopted it into the group, we were kind of dubious as to whether or not it would really help to stay as connected, and it's better than we thought. Because your guy can listen to it when it's convenient, he can focus, and they can hit you back. And especially during the night, if it's not an emergency, he can hit you back, and there it is, waiting for you in the morning. You can listen to it while you're shaving. It is fantastic. Highly recommend. Again, the app is called Marco Polo, available at all your app stores. All right, so let's talk about the tribe thing. This is one of the greatest losses of modern civilization, that we have lost the fact that we don't live in tribes anymore. We live in groups, by ideologies or political beliefs. We tour around with the guys that agree with me, whether you like a red tie or a blue tie, but we don't have that sense of community that a tribe had, where we raise someone from birth and there are elders that teach that person how to be a better person as they're going through life. The men in the old days would teach the boys to hunt, and the women would teach them to hunt and to forage, and whatever the breakdown was. But again, you had someone in your life that was constantly there. You had a fire tender, for God's sake, and at least he was always there. If everybody was out hunting and foraging, you had that person there for you. What do we have today? We have latchkey kids. Well, we had that since the 80s, actually. And actually, there's a phenomenon. There's a real correlation between latchkey kids and alcoholism and addiction. I remember learning that in a training, and I see that a lot in my group, that a lot of my patients were not well monitored during their teen years when they fell in with bad peers. So this sense of a tribe where I can learn, be safe, share, and get wisdom, I think that's so valuable. In America, we're getting most of our wisdom from the television and or from other technologies, social media, whatever. And that's where we're determining what's normal or what's abnormal. So that should give you some idea why our culture, society is so screwed up right now. But when you're in a tribe, you're also held accountable. You can't really do things that don't go against the theme or the principles or the rules of what that tribe stands for. And particularly in recovery, that's so important, because the tribe will see you getting sick before you see yourself getting sick. It's a strange phenomenon. I know you may be very smart, but you have no way to see yourself slipping backwards. But the tribe will see it, and they'll come up to you and say, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? It seems like you're down. Seems like something's going on." And that will provide you that opportunity to get honest and share with them. Now, I went through several phases with this tribe thing, and I have to tell you, I didn't do it perfectly. Never. There's no such thing as perfection in recovery, so don't worry about that. My original tribe in Minneapolis was solid for one reason. I had to go to a men's halfway house, and there was a sister halfway house for women called Progress Valley up in Minnesota, helped save my life. And we had to get together and do things like dances and meetings and things like that. So when we came out, I had this huge family of people around me. And that was great because I didn't know anybody in that city, and I would have been very alone and isolated. Plus, I didn't have a car for the first 3 years of my recovery, so I needed rides to places. And I got exposed to a lot of different things that I never would have been exposed to just from being thrown into that mix. And then you get separated. I moved to California. I won't give you the long, boring story. But through being in the corporate world eventually and all that, I got pretty isolated. There was a time in my sobriety that I really look back on that I was attending meetings haphazardly because I was in different towns all the time. And I didn't really have a solid sponsor. I had a phone sponsor. And what I mean by that is, call them if I have trouble, but otherwise we don't really talk. And I think the only reason I didn't drink or drug is because I did keep my connection open with higher power every day. I was talking to God every day. I think that's what saved my butt. Now, let's fast forward to when I returned to Louisville in 1997. I joined a men's group where I met a sponsor named Dr. Burns Brady, who turned my head around, as well as other teachers, and gave me these deeper level tools that I have to share with you today or throughout this podcast. And we had a subgroup of younger people in this older men's group that we started calling ourselves the Holy Rollers. And it's funny how just trying to have fun in recovery and, using a name or whatever upsets old timers or upsets certain people. And, that would give you a kind of a charge to upset the old timer because sometimes they can be overbearing. And all it was about was we were looking for this thing called juice, which meant how can we get involved in activities? How can we have fun after the meeting? We would be out in the parking lot throwing the football and the frisbee and yelling and hooting and hollering. And it probably was my imagination, but I don't know, not sure. Old timers up on the stairs judging us, looking down on us, whatever. But we were teaching the newcomers about the group, about the power of the group, about the power of staying together. This group, the Holy Rollers, would meet once a month at a guy's house to have their own meeting where we would talk about real shit, and it would last about 3 or 4 hours. One of those mini retreats where we could really talk. That was a powerful experience. Every Sunday, once a month, we would do that. We also took meetings into the thing called Dismas House here, which was a halfway house for men coming out of prison. And the first time we went down there, they put us in a cell to make us wait before they would take us to the room where we were having the meeting. I don't think they wanted meetings in there, but I had been asked to bring it in there from a lady who was a social worker down there. The guards didn't like us. We thought they were going to strip search us or something. It was pretty uptight for a while there. But we had a great time, and we ended up coming out of there high as hell because we did service work, and then we would drive down Main Street, Market Street, on the way home past the Healing Place, which is a big recovery center here, and we'd scream at all the guys out on the sidewalk smoking because we were just spreading the juice. Again, it was about having fun. It was about being with your group and not just at the meeting. And for those of you that are out there that, maybe only you see your people once a week at your meeting, you don't know what you're missing out on. That sense of connection and being together and doing things outside of the group. That's what was deeper level recovery to me. I got closer to people than I'd ever been in my entire recovery, except with my very best friends in earliest recovery. Okay? But I had that with several men, with a group of men. It was phenomenal. Then we started this group called Spiritual Underground, and it seemed to go to a different level, almost like a higher level, a steroid level of power in the group. That when we're together, we go on retreats together, we share experiences together. You can see your brother across the room or out in public, and just by nodding and looking at him, you can say, all right, cool, you're all right? You all right? Yeah, I'm all right. All right, cool, just want to make sure. And I saw Travis this morning in the aftercare group. Again, he's been on here. Look up his podcast. It's fantastic. And just from him being there, I could tell he was all right, just from the way he's looking. I know that, man. I know when he's good. I know when he's not. And I wish this for everybody. I don't want anybody out there dying alone. I don't want anybody else that's out there suffering alone, that you don't feel you can talk about your real shit with anybody. So please come in around the fire. Don't circle around like those wolves that won't come in. So come into the fire. We'll make room for you on the log and join us. It's unlike any other experience in life. And I can tell people I know, people I love, people in my family, they don't have this. They don't have this fellowship. They don't have the number of people that show up on your birthday night and cheer you on, you know? In our ladies group and in the who have their own retreat, but also in the mixed group we have on Sundays for TSSR, 12-Step Spiritual Recovery, they put up decorations for birthdays every month. Like, they do the whole room, and they have food, and they make it a major celebration. And again, those are those little touches that let you know you're loved, that you're cared for. People give a damn about you. We applaud everything in our meeting. We applaud step work. When people achieve certain levels of step work, they did their third step. He did his fifth, sixth, and seventh. And that makes the newcomer feel a part of, not apart from, right? So, again, where else are you going to get this? Maybe you could join a church. There are good ones out there. I'm not saying there's not. But it's harder. I think it's better that you come into this group, you do the steps, you get a sponsor. Once you get a sponsor, you've got an instant family, because he's got his sponsor, and his sponsor has his sponsor, and they all have their little groups and tribes, and suddenly you're part of that big clan instantly, just by asking someone to work with you. But kind of petering out on the topic, but it's not something I knew I wanted in my life. It's not something I knew I needed in my life. But God, now I can never imagine going through life again without having these men around me, without having this tribe, this group. And I know my friend Dan, who I'm going to ask to speak in a second here, has used that power of the group recently to deal with some stuff. So, and it's there. It's there in a heartbeat, you know. One last thing I'll say about it is I make the statement in my group all the time to the newcomers, sick patients I have, that I know you might think you have this with your using buddies, but you don't. But what I have is that if I was in real trouble at this moment and I made one phone call to one person and said, Christopher needs emergency help now, everybody and anybody that could drop everything and come would be in the car, and I might actually have 50 people swarm the building if it was real emergency trouble, if it was like nightmare trouble. Who else has that? And I had one of my patients who said, I think that's bullshit. I think you're making that up. And she came to our home group one night for birthday night, and she ate her words. Now she says, you ain't lying. It's probably more like 100. Think about that. 100 people that have your back. And at least at the bottom line, 100 people that might show up at your funeral. This is what life is all about. And to wrap it up and get Dan in here, let me just quote the Beatles' final definitive statement on Abbey Road, their last released album. The love you make is equal to the love, or the love you take, is equal to, that's the alcoholic version. The love you take is equal to the love you make. And if you commit to one person, to another, build your tribe, and all of a sudden all that love comes back on you, it's overwhelming. It's literally overwhelming. So, Dan, I know you're a big fan of the tribe. My friend Dan has retreats where he opens up his cabin and brings guys down. He's always willing to do service work. He does a ton of service work for our group to help us stick together with phone lists and all that other stuff. What's your thoughts on this topic of our tribe and our group?
Yeah, it seems like something real simple, or something just, I don't know, but it is. It's, we joke around, but it might be the best thing about recovery.
There you go.
I have all these friends. I mean, I can't count them. I can't even count them. And, that Johann Hari said that opposite of addiction is connection. When he slipped that in a little TED Talk, man, and now you hear that talked about every place. And, the connection is not going to save your life on its own. You have to have some more than, I believe you have to work these steps, clean up your past, do your inventory, all that as well. But that is a big, big statement, And I've noticed also now and again on some stuff where people are like using tribal stuff as like a derogatory term,
Interesting.
Particularly in politics and around and that kind of stuff. And I reject it, I don't. Of course, everything has all coins have two sides. So I kind of hear what they're saying at some level where you get kind of like the mob mentality out of that. But that is not what I call tribe.
They mean a tribe in terms of exclusionary, whereas our tribe is very inclusionary. If you walk in our door, you're going to be hugged to death, and you're going to be welcomed right in.
And to drop another name, Sebastian Younger has a book that's all about tribal stuff, and then he's coming at it from the side of like military. And that's kind of what I kind of see a parallel, because combat will make you bond with men, your buddies, like not much else will. You are truly counting on each other to stay a freaking alive. And I see a real big parallel where is happening. It's similar to what we're doing in our group, because it's just as deadly. And we sit here and we bonded in order to keep each other alive. You need the guy on your right and your left to be there for you. I watched it happen today. This is a cool story. I'm going to leave the names out of it, but a guy that I'm working with, but I'm not working with him yet. He's asked me to take him through the work, but he wants to wait until school's over. Another friend of mine said, "Hey, are you up this morning?" Another sponsee, and I said, "Yeah." And he called me, and he told me that this guy I just talked about was in the emergency room that my other sponsee, is working in. So one of my sponsees got to take care of another one of my sponsees in the emergency room this morning, and the patient talked about how much it meant to him that when he walked in there, that this guy was going to be my nurse, and I knew I was being taken care of. One of my brothers is here. I'm good to go.
That's awesome.
And I said, the Discord thing. It's somehow or another I received this assignment, this nudge from above, to kind of try some things out in recovery that look like tools that could be used. And we started that group chat stuff, and it really did. It brought us together. Somebody else introduced it to me, and when I saw how cool it was where they were using it, I thought, man, we need one of these. And I didn't know how people were going to take it, but we've got 60, 70 dudes in a Discord out of our home group, and we get up in the morning and say good morning. And certain people always add a little quote. Other people will maybe put their little reading out of what they read this morning, and do that. And it's one of the first things I do in the morning, even before I read because I always read a little, first thing I do is I pray when I wake up. It's almost automatic today. But the next thing I do is check in on my brothers, because sometimes somebody went through the ringer last night at 1 a.m. and I was asleep and didn't know it. And the group come together to support this particular person. And at the same time, I get all this inspirational food to start my day with. I'm seeing my brothers, my friends getting up excitedly saying good morning. That's something we didn't used to do. It was when we was back in the day, man, you was like, oh, it's freaking morning again. But I read it and I get that inspirational. I get juice from it, from doing that.
I have this imaginary picture in my head of you walking out the door with your tribe behind you, because just making that connection first off of the day. And I can't even imagine back in 1983 how much helpful that would have been to have that. So what he's talking about is an app called Discord. There's also group chat that you can set up for your home group that everybody can stay in touch 24 hours a day, and the newcomer can just drop in whenever they need to and say help if they need help.
Yep, and we celebrate our victories in there, and we support each other when we're having trouble, and that has been, I picture this like 12-step recovery in general. There is these rooms all over the world of people just waiting for you to come be their friend. I mean, it is ready-made group of friends out there. I know it's hit and miss, and we have something very, very special, but we cultivated it. It will not all of it was by accident. You started the group with a certain thing in mind about not being, being welcoming to the newcomers, right? And being a safe place to share anything you need to share, because I have heard in 12-step room once in a while, that's an outside issue. We ain't talking about that in here. And we don't have outside issues at our home group. You got something going on in your life, you are encouraged to share about it. I got gut punched the other night, and with something having to do with my daughter again, and it hit me hard, and it made, ultimately I realized it had made me very, very sad I have such a big support group. We all do, but I mean, I always think of it as mine, right? And you think of it as yours, and Travis thinks of it as his, and that our thing, that we. But most of the time, we do burning desires in our group, and most of the time, I have talked to enough people that it's not weighing heavy on me by the time I make it to Tuesday night. But I sit there in that chair going, Dan, if you're going to talk, you got to walk a walk, get your butt up there and share. And I don't want to get detailed in sharing with what this is. I can do it in a general way that I'm hurting. And then over the past few days, everybody's been checking on me, sending me texts, call me, and thinking about you, Dan, love you, and all that stuff. Just it carries you. I've had that happen a few times. I've had a few incidences in my recovery that have really rocked the boat. And I think about it, that support group, that community that I'm a part of, is like a giant big safety net, cargo net underneath the tight wire that we all feel like we're kind of walking. And I don't have to be so careful up on the tight wire. I can get a little risky and do stuff, and or when the wind blows like it did Monday night and wants to knock me off the tightrope, I got a safety net underneath of me that I have complete confidence will carry me. Guys were Shane come over Monday night. I mean, and he didn't ask. He said, he called me up and he said, I am coming over. And what are you going to tell him? No. And that's another thing. I know I did. That's my first reaction. No, dude, you don't need to do that. But I didn't. I just shut my mouth. I said, okay, see you in a little bit. And just let people help me. Allow that support to happen.
And one of the perfect people to help you, because he has a daughter.
Yep.
It's like higher power. When we say no, we're interfering that maybe higher power is touching him, that he wants to come, and he's the perfect guy you need to talk to because he has a daughter.
Yeah, yep. All these, the group, and then these tools, I had no idea, and I really like it today that this, again, I know I'm jumping. I say that God, higher power, has left sticky notes around for me to find, like an Easter egg hunt almost. These things just pop into my head. And the podcast is one of them. Even moving to this podcast, to the I Am One Too, was one of them, and I've learned to follow them. And I send a text out to everybody but the birthday celebrant on the day a guy's celebrating his birthday, and so that guy's going to get love poured on him all day long that day. And and I felt funny about doing it in the beginning, like it was weird. It was something weird. But I also can use that text blast and it's not a group text because I hate group texts. It is a separate text that you receive that where when somebody needs prayers, or when somebody's speaking and let's rally up and show up for a dude who's speaking, or when we're getting together to have dinner, or various things. It's like a newsletter for our home group, and to me, it seems like it's been something that's been super valuable and beneficial to us.
It's invaluable. You can't even put a price on it. Just two things that came to my mind is the amount of guys that will show up to support you when you speak. How many of you out there in recovery have that? Like, you show up at the meeting and 20 of your guys are sitting outside waiting for you, just there to support you. Yep. And this thing about the birthdays, man, if you don't have this in your life, you don't know what you're missing. But I get so many texts and calls and stuff on my birthdays. It's overwhelming every year. Emotionally, it's overwhelming. It's like, holy crap, I talk about, and maybe we'll go in depth on this on a future podcast, but addicts and alcoholics do have lingering isms. That's what we're working on the rest of our life. And one of the isms from a dysfunctional alcoholic family system is you don't really feel worthy. And you feel like the other shoe's going to drop all the time if you get something good. So that may be why we buffet compliments off, etc. But you get all that love, that amount of love, it almost feels like, oh, it's too much. I'm not that good. I'm not that good a guy, I'm just a human being, blah, blah, blah. But they're expressing their love in brotherhood, that you're walking the path with me, and I see you at the meeting every week, and I appreciate you for everything you do and everything you do for your own recovery. And if you don't have that in your life, please consider adopting that in your home group. Have a home group meeting, discuss it. Don't offend anybody. Make sure everybody has their vote. But to be able to put out announcements that it's somebody's birthday so that everybody else can juice bomb them, man, what a great idea. Again, nothing I had in early recovery.
Yep. then with the downside on it, there's a lot of downside on the technology, but man, I have found some ways that it super benefits the connectivity of our men's home group. And I always make it an option too. Not everybody wants to participate in Discord. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And that thing, that fire, I like that analogy, that we're all up around that campfire, and you got those guys though that are back in the shadows on the outside perimeter, and we do such a good job of going, hey, come on, come in. And it gets mistaken for some kind of cliquey kind of stuff at times, but I think it's ultimately their almost like their grief that they don't have that.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to that term cliquey anymore. I mean, I think it's tired and played out. I think we can just throw that out for the rest of the time, in my own personal opinion, because what I see as the guy that sends the newcomer to your all's meetings like a little experiment, when that lab rat gets back the next day in my group, man, those guys were so friendly. I got so many hugs and getting phone numbers, and they're all welcoming me. I mean, that was amazing. I'm not sure I've ever been to a group like that before. That is consistent scientific evidence that shows up every week when they come back and tell me that. So I'm not going to buy that cliquey shit anymore. That's just people with resentments.
I usually have to bat it off with new people now and again, because they will bring that up, and then I'll have to explain to them that no, it's not, and you can be part of it. We're not excluding you. Jump in here. And I remember watching you do that specifically to me when I was real new and was having trouble coming in, because some people do, of like people standing around outside the meeting afterwards, and I'm kind of standing on by myself, a little bit lost, like a little lost puppy, and say, no, come on over, join our circle. People afraid to, and there is a little bit of something like don't want to interrupt the conversation, but we, no, you're not inserting yourself in something. Come on and be part of it.
So that's an assignment for the old timers Dan just gave you there. Look around after the meeting and see the loner and say, psh, psh, just come in. Just don't say anything. Just stand here. Just stand here. You're part of the group. Be with us.
Yeah.
And welcome him in.
I consistently, I am on social media, and I do watch some stuff, and it's almost entertainment on this one. It's called Friends of Bill on Facebook, and the varying attitudes of people, especially like you like to say, the crusty old timers. And there's people vehemently against celebrating sobriety birthdays. And I'm like, golly, how can you be against that? Most people will tell you that are in recovery that birthday's more important to them. That date's more important to them than their actual birthday. I can say that for me.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to have somebody say, don't celebrate it.
Let me touch on that, Dan, because that is a damaged little kid who hasn't done his healing work. I talked about this in aftercare group this morning, that, you'll run into these people that hate Christmas. That doesn't compute to a child. If you find me a child that hates Christmas, I'll give you money. That is a rare find. That's like the Yeti. You ain't going to find a child that don't like Christmas. So what are we talking about? That's talking about you have changed and things happened to you since you were that way. And if you don't do your healing work, which most people don't know how to do these steps properly, and they're not doing deep level recovery, they're just doing enough to clear up their past, fine, if that's what you want. But I don't want to be that guy that hates Christmas or hates birthdays or hates newcomers because they're having a good time in sobriety. God, why get sober if you're going to be like that? Yeah. You tell me about that all the time. You'll encounter these guys that just have an axe to grind. And it's like, I thought we were supposed to be happy, joyous, and free. That's what Bill tells us. Bill tells us also that, basically everything he says in the big book is wear life like a loose overcoat. Stop taking yourself so damn seriously. But they're just old school. I like to say they're old dinosaurs, hopefully all dying off. I'm an old dinosaur, but I ain't like them.
Nope.
And it's all about the newcomer. Bill Wilson wrote so many things like that. How can you just say birthdays aren't important? That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah. One of my sponsees the other day was talking to his new guy, and his new guy's father's been in, he's been sober close to someplace in your neighborhood kind of thing. And he was telling, my sponsee was telling his sponsee to listen to like this and the Spiritual Underground podcast, And he got excited and loved it, so he shared it with his dad, and his dad pooped on it. Saying what we're doing here is breaking anonymity and we shouldn't be doing it, and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, just crusty old timer stuff, and hopefully that'll wash out. And I think that whole anonymity thing, and I understand the reason for it, but or reason for it in certain cases, but doing these things, anonymity's out the window, and I find that I can help more. I get opportunity to help more people. The more anonymous I am, the more closed I can be to helping people.
It's funny, just as a side note, since you touched on that, because I'm sure some people are saying, well, yeah, what about that? Bill Wilson spent a great deal of his later writings in the grapevine, with the majority of which can be found in the book as Bill Sees It, talking about how our traditions are guidelines, and they were meant to be living, breathing, flexible things. Rules are not. Laws are not. That is why he called them traditions, that traditionally this is the way we handle this. And invariably he fielded letters from everybody all over the country the rest of his life, always asking, well, what do we do about this situation? And our group's struggling with this. What do we do about this situation? And you know what he did in every single case? I mean, every single letter back. He wrote, well, traditionally, this is basically what we do. This is what we say in the program. However, you are completely at ease and freedom to do whatever you think is best. That's called flexibility. That's called freedom. Now, on the issue on anonymity, I would never break another alcoholic's anonymity, because that's not my right. I do have the right to disclose that I'm in recovery. I don't have the right to come off like I'm a spokesperson for AA. And that was the danger back in the day, that some baseball player went out on the airwaves saying, hey, it's the best, look at me. And then he got drunk. And so the public thought, well, AA doesn't work. Look at Babe Ruth, to use a baseball guy. It wasn't him. And he got drunk. So we're not out there trying to promote and say that, this... We're not trying to be spokespeople for the program. I'm here today as a spokesperson for recovery, as if you didn't pick that up from the first words out of my mouth. And as part of my recovery, I use the 12 steps. 12 steps through AA tradition have been shared with any organization that wants it. AA doesn't own them. They don't copyright them. They say, you want to use them? They're all yours. That's not part of not sharing. You can share the 12 steps. So again, it's a fine line, and now AA has adopted guidelines for social media. However, I think in the spirit of helping others, where's the greater evil or the greater good? And I know this man that you're talking about who pooped on us will never listen to this, but is it worth it that Dan and I happen to go out a little bit on the branch and bend the branch a little bit just to say that we want to share this with the world, versus we might save a fucking life? And you're going to tell me, as a person with a heart in recovery, that you're going to stand on your principle to such an extent that you would let that person die rather than try something to help them? That just makes zero effing sense to me, and I'll fight you to the death on that. This is about service work, and it's about helping the next person get a leg up. And God forbid, if we become so secret a society, they will never find us. I didn't know what this program was all about, and I had seen after-school specials about alcoholics, and I had an alcoholic father, and I still didn't know about Alcoholics Anonymous in 1984. So let's not be stupid or short-sighted or inflexible and intolerant when it comes to the fact of helping others, And ultimately, if you are off your bean, going too far out on the branch, your sponsor will go, hey, careful. And by the way, person who pooped on us, how many AA speakers are on YouTube giving their full name and talking about the program? So I don't get it.
I get it.
They're not out there. The speakers I listen to, they're not out there saying, I'm the representative and this is, the way it is and all that. They're telling their story. And your story is yours. You have a right to it. You can tell I'm kind of passionate about this, Dan. I'm sorry I went a little off there, but you can tell I'm into this.
Yeah.
Because I'm about helping people, and that bottom line, that's all I care about.
Same here, and I understand, like when I was saying, when a guy's coming new to recovery, it's good for him to know that people aren't going to be outing him, so that he can feel safe to come in there under our principle of our tradition of anonymity. But I'll tell you, and I know people. It's a common thing all the time where a guy he's not telling his mom and dad, he's not telling these people around him, and you just let that go for a while, and and the next thing you know, if they're walking around telling everybody they're sober, the shame falls off of them, and they're so happy to be in this recovered state, and there's so much juice is happening in their lives that they can't keep quiet about it. And we are all allowed to share our own experience.
You want to hear a different angle of insanity? We have a group member right now that introduces himself as anonymous.
Anonymous, yeah.
And I get it. That's okay. That's his right. And I know nobody's correcting him. We accept you. We want you to do what you feel is best. However, I would say to him, if I was his sponsor, how many things did you do out there as a drunk that you were proud of and you didn't worry about hiding or being anonymous about? Did you ever show your ass? Did you ever take your clothes off? Did you ever do this or that and curse their family out in public? How many things, dude? And you're telling me that this one thing within a safe meeting of other alcoholics and you're not willing to say your name? You've got some major guilt and shame we got to work on, buddy.
Yeah. And
you got your priorities upset, mixed up.
And back into the topic of this program, that's block you from the tribe.
Yeah.
I mean,
it does. I don't know his name.
Don't come talk to me.
I don't know his name.
Yep, I don't either. And it's a shield around him. I don't see anybody talking to him after the meeting or anything either. He usually flies out real quick, so he's missing out on this whole connection issue that we have to offer. But he's keeping coming back. So just so like far. Everything else so far, if he'll keep on doing that, I bet he'll change his mind at some point. I've watched guys come in and say, that won't identify as an alcoholic. They just say their names, and don't do that. And if they stick around, and I watched a real cool one time here in Southern Indiana, where a guy was coming for every week to what was my New Omni home group for a couple months, easy, maybe more than that. And then one day he walked in there and he said, "Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm an alcoholic." And every neck in the room snapped over. He had broken through, and I know that guy today actually, and he does a whole lot of service stuff. I went to big book study weekends that he has been putting together and all that. So he come in all the way when he figured out that he was an alcoholic. And truthfully, that's probably actually more accurate, because when you show up and the first meeting and you say, "Hi, I'm Dan, I'm an alcoholic," I really don't even know what alcoholism is. It'd probably be more accurate to come in and say, "My name is Dan, and I think I might be an alcoholic." That would be more true. But
as an alcoholic, we can't just let things go easy. So I do have one last thing to say. God forbid that man pooping on his son's juice because his son had listened and liked it that much that he wanted to share it with his father. And then he goes to his father, like you're going to God, and you say, "Hey, I found this thing. It's really good. I want to share it with you." And he goes, "No, that's wrong. You're not supposed to do it that way." And he's like, "Oh, shit, really? I made a mistake? Fuck. Okay, I better not listen to it." And what if he gets drunk again and dies? Because he did not get the juice he was getting. Now, I'm not saying this podcast may be the sole thing that saved his life, but he finally found something that he liked and was working for him. And here comes the old crusty old camera, let me just poop on you. And I've seen that. 40 plus years of walking these rooms. I've seen the guy get on fire and just, they got to put the flame out. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yep.
So, again, he won't listen to this, but God bless him if he does.
Yeah,
might help him.
He was getting kicked around in the Discord, and my comment was, I can't wait for his dad to see what real recovery is.
Maybe his son will teach him.
Maybe. I sometimes wonder if that's not the angle.
One thing I did want to end on and wrap it up is we're going to have a question and answer period. Is we have a friend of ours, and I won't say what state, but they have moved to another state, and they're having a hell of a time finding the tribe that they had down here and building a tribe. And usually that's what it takes when I move to new states, and like I did in Louisville. You got to just start your own meetings and start your own thing, which is what this person is on the verge of doing. But she told me a story that she has noticed that people come to the meeting and then they just leave afterwards. They don't go out to eat. They don't stick around and talk. None of that, Dan. Can you even imagine going to a meeting as a newcomer and then poof, meeting's over, we all dessert, cars are, parking lot's empty, and you're just standing there.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
Yep.
So
I see meetings like that, and I usually don't go back to them too often either. I was told, come early and stay late.
mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, whatever you're doing out there, don't rely on your sponsor as your sole guide. That's your go-to person for whether you're doing what you need to be doing. And then also, don't give up. Don't let anybody else steal your juice. That's a Brene Brown thing. Don't let anybody steal your fucking juice. Because that's what we thrive on. You find something that works for you, you nurture that, and you don't let anybody put that fire out. I'm telling you. We're talking about life or death issues for us. So, thank you for that, Dan. Appreciate you, and appreciate you being a part of the tribe. And what a great community that we have, and we just continue to grow. And ultimately, what Dan always say when it comes down to bottom line stuff is, I really like the way we do it, because it's really working for me. So I'm just going to keep doing the way we do it. And if you'd like on board with that, send us a letter, send us a comment. Even if you want to take me to task on this, bring it on. I'll go with you, toe to toe. We take all letters and comers to IM12, those 4 digits there, I always say this part, recovery. So again, you got to add the word recovery. We couldn't get IM12 alone. IM12 recovery at gmail.com. And every week we answer your questions. We'll address your issues. And again, if you have differing viewpoints, I am not afraid to read it, provided you're polite. So bring it on. Let's get into it. And maybe we can both learn something. All right, now we're going to get into our questions. We have 2 for the week. One's really deep and one's pretty good itself. So let's start with this one. I am very early in recovery, just a little over 2 months. Congratulations. That's freaking awesome. And I've heard the word resentment quite a bit. What are some effective ways to get rid of resentments for good? Great question. Thank you for sending it in. So I wasn't familiar with that term when I came in either, resentment. It was actually many years in my recovery till I had a speaker break down the Latin roots, which made total sense to me. Because up till that point, I thought, well, it's stuff I'm angry about. It's stuff that bothers me, right? But I didn't realize the depth of it. So the Latin roots, R-E, if you put that in front of any word, means to do over and over again. And sentiment comes from the Latin root sentire. You're talking to a Jefferson County, Kentucky public school graduate, not a private school graduate, so we did not get Latin. But sentire means to feel, experience, relive, etc. So literally, when you have these memories, these things that are unfinished business that I have not put to peace or to bed entirely, even though I will tell myself it doesn't bother me anymore, if someone brings up that person's name, or I get a smell in the air, or it's a certain time of year, and I go, it's not gone. It's still in my trash can. So it is something that when it comes up, I relive it, I re-experience it, I re-feel it, just as if it happened yesterday. And that's the potency of these things. It's not like you're thinking about it 10 years ago. When it comes up, it's as fresh, that wound is as fresh as it ever was, because it's never been healed. Okay, so we have a very effective means through the 4th through 7th step of dealing with resentments, and you're going to learn all about this if you're just starting the step work, which I believe this person is. So hang in there for that. Okay, there's no reason to jump ahead. Stay on whatever step you're on, but when you get to that, you'll understand the process for this. I want everybody out there to know that it really is the full process, including amends, that if you want it gone for good, that's the full process. So the short breakdown would be inventory and 4, where I write it all down, just get it on the paper. It's not even that important what you write down in 4 because it's really about 5. But get stuff on paper so you have stuff to talk about in 5. Then in 5, I'm going to meet with my sponsor, and I'm going to go over my stuff on my inventory and get their feedback and get their experiences with that. Then in 6 and 7, we're going to agree on the things, my sponsor I, in step 5 that I want to get rid of, the things that are objectionable to me, that get on my nerves. I don't want to carry them anymore. And in 6 and 7, I'm going to go and ask my higher power to help remove them. I want to be free of these things that are holding me back in my progress. Now, that seems like it would be enough, but it actually is not. You're going to get a big boost of juice after your 7th step, and guys come in like they're on fire. And I say Dan can answer when he speaks on this in just a second. Maybe about a month later, maybe 6 weeks, they start to get a little dry if they don't go forward with steps 8 and 9. And then in step 8, which is an overlooked step in the program, we do a whole forgiveness piece for the people that are on your list. in your inventory before you go approach them with amends. You've got to let go what you've got with them, which is more prayer work. You'd think it would be enough to ask God to remove it. We find that's not enough. There's still some lingering stuff. So I got to work on help me forgive them. Give me the power to forgive them. Let's do the process to forgive them. And then in step 9, I'm actually going to approach these people and take responsibility for what I did. I'm going to own my part. I'm going to be honest, and then I'm going to ask them to share what they need to share with me to get it off their chest. And then in that process, I will tell you what happens. Miracle. I don't care what they've done to you. I don't care how hard it was for you to accept and deal with. This is a pathway to freedom where it will never bother you again in your life. And strangely enough, some of the people, if not all of them that you approach with amends, you will now look back on with compassion, no ill will, and sometimes even friendship, and even think about the good things you had together, like I do with my dad. I never thought I could get over the things that happened with me, and now I look back and I can look at actually the good times we had together and not focus on just the bad. So it's a tricky question because resentments, I don't know if they go away for good. Some of them kind of, especially childhood woundings and abuse and stuff. But I can tell you this, we can get you to the point where it just doesn't bother you. Just not part of your life today. So, Dan, any thoughts on that? Getting rid of resentments for good?
Yeah, it's kind of like my podcast guest the other day kept on asking me questions about what would you do with this or what would you do with that, and my answers are always in these 12 steps,
Mm-hmm.
And I know it is, some things can linger, and I've seen some of them really linger in some people, especially some, highly traumatic kind of stuff, but I've still seen it work using the tools we use in 4 through 9 ultimately of getting it to go. And sometimes I've watched people have to work pretty hard to get some pretty bad ones to go away. But one day I get that phone call, and it's like freedom all just happened. They kept on the path, and that's like you said. Most of those that I've occurred with has been, I'll just say fairly. No, I'm not going to say severe. Fairly severe childhood trauma that some sick human has put on them, and even in some cases the offender is no longer alive, so people will end up thinking that maybe they can't get free if the person is either one, that they're still around or they're not around. But I do like that term on that resentment, that I just keep on refilling this over and over and over, and it may not necessarily even be anger, right? But I'm getting gut punched somehow at some level when I get triggered for that person. And you're right, it is. It can be. I like Scott Lee likes to say that it doesn't weigh anything anymore. That it's fairly heavy to begin with, and what this process does is takes all the weight out of it. It's still happened to you. It's not like you forget it or, that kind of thing. And also, I like the thing about the amends about opening up the door to repair in a relationship. Some people will kind of dodge these amends, and I know that ain't necessarily the question, but it'll open the door to with this other person on healing the relationship. It may not happen right then, and maybe some more work to do. But other people, when you come do that 9th step with them, they also look at you with a different pair of glasses too, because they're like, oh well, because most people just want you to own it, and you do that, and it will open the door to begin some healing with these people that you've been struggling with.
The way I experienced it is that it feels like it happened to somebody else. And the only phrase I can come up with is it's no longer personal. That shit that happened with me and my dad, it felt like he was doing it to me. It was personal. Why did he pick on me? Why did he do this to me?
Yeah.
And he was a sick dude. He was just doing what sick people do. It could have been anybody. It could have been a different person being his son. I just happened to be his son at the time. And again, it feels like it happened to somebody else. That's how free you can get one day.
That's how I feel about my whole pre-recovery stage. I was telling that podcast guest the other day, it's like it was a movie I watched or something else. I've detached from it. And even that whole period of the crazy stuff I did, it doesn't feel like it was me.
Mm. The other thing that's, Bill says in the big book, he's talking about character defects, but he means our stuff. He says we could not do this alone. We had to have God's help. Now, that's a nebulous tall order. It's like, well, what do you mean, God's help? What am I supposed to do? Well, guess what? That's what the 12 steps do. I don't know anything that's as miraculously effective that breaks down step by step. We can get you to a place to solicit God's assistance on a level that's way different and way deeper than just sitting in a church and praying for God to remove it. You can do that till you're blue in the face. Take away this resentment. Take away this resentment. You're going to walk out of that church and say, God, I hate that guy. But if you do these little, well, I'm going to write down some stupid shit. I don't see how it's going to help. I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk to my sponsor. I don't see how it's going to help, but I'll do it. I'm supposed to say a stupid prayer. I don't say how this stupid prayer is going to be, but I'll do it. And then you do these stupid little things, and you come out the other end, and you're like, it's gone. Finally, it's gone. So for the writer here, go with your sponsor and do your steps. Please, I promise. And then I want you to write us back and tell us it worked, because we know it's going to work. And I'd love to hear the results after the fact. But resentment is our number one offender, and it will get you. So please, drop that stuff. You don't want to carry those rocks the rest of your life. All right, second letter for the day. This is a good one because I like a longer letter, guys, where you put a little information in there and more details. Good morning. I'm in a small town, Kentucky town, working at a treatment center. I have been working here for over a year now. God bless you. You're a saint. It's hard work. I came here on a relapse after being sober for 5 years and 8 months. Wow. The organization I work for does not push the focus of the 12 steps as much as I think they should. I'm beginning to feel like I am stuck. I feel myself wanting to recluse and just stay in my room. I reach out, asking guys around me if they would mind going to a meeting, and I'm taking a few days off to come to Louisville to see my mom, daughter, and a few friends from AA. I'm wanting to try to put in an application for jobs as well. So how do you deal with the anger of how institutional America operates? I catch myself getting resentful because I want to help people, and the institutions are businesses, so I know they just can't help everybody. I know I need to get back to calling and talking to my AA friends, but I feel disconnected. I don't like it. Any thoughts or ideas would be appreciated. Thanks. And I won't give his name, but I'll use his handle, and some of y'all will know Big Country 78. Hello, Big Country 78. Long time no hear. Good to have you right in, buddy. So there's a couple of things here we need to address. Feeling disconnected and feeling like you're unplugged is very dangerous. Like I said, when I was on that time and working for the corporations and traveling the U.S. and got far out on the branch, man, I don't know. I'm surprised the branch didn't break. So let's attend to that first. Make sure you're reconnecting with people. Just reach out to your friends and say help. That's all you got to do. Doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And they'll just pull you back in. You'd be amazed. Even people you haven't talked to in years, and you just start talking and suddenly you're right back where you started from. I think you're isolated out there in that small town. And I will say that you go outside the bigger towns and the opportunities for treatment and / good treatment drop off precipitously. It is scary. I can take you 25 miles outside the Louisville city limits and then 25 miles on top of that and ask you to find an AA meeting even. And you're going to be like, what the hell? They don't have them? What are you talking about? Yeah, crazy. They don't have them. And there's tons of our friends, especially in this state, dying in the Appalachian Mountains and Hazard, Kentucky, one of the worst places for meth, and not getting any help. And they just think that there's something wrong with them and they're just bad people and they don't understand that they're sick. So I get your spirit that you're trying to bring the solution into the program, into the facility. And I get your big heart wants them to get the juice that you got. I'm a rebel. If you haven't noticed, I will work in the system, but I'll sometimes work at odds with the system to do what I got to do. But I'm a little bit fortunate. I don't have a boss that nitpicks me. He knows I do what I do well, so he allows me to do my angles, and we help a lot of people. And I know how frustrating that can be, that you know that this is what they need when they leave treatment, but your center isn't pushing it. It's odd, though, because a lot of treatment centers are run by people in recovery, so I'm surprised they don't have some people in the higher-ups that might be in recovery, and so maybe you might check that out. Because if you've got one ally as a vice president or marketing director or somebody that is in the program, then that adds more power to your argument that maybe we should bring in an AA meeting, which I think is the easiest way to add that. You know, in my experience, institutions are a little bit sketchy about changing curriculum because it's got to be evidence-based and it's got to be make sure so we can get our funding and not lose our license. So, but if you say bring in an AA meeting and then, of course, the nurses and the techs are like, well, yeah, we could take a break while they're having their AA meeting, that's an easy way to do it. So I don't know if that's an option for you to just suggest that can we bring in an AA meeting once a week. Anger of how institutional America operates. Well, mine is in the area of psychiatry because the hierarchy in mental health is the techs who have to do the shit work, and then you have the therapists, which do the real work with the patients, and then you have the psychiatrists that run the show. And they're treated like gods. And literally their schedule is all that matters. God forbid if they need you, drop everything. The psychiatrists want you. And they don't sign their papers. We sign them for them. And they're never around. And they're overworked. And they got way too many patients. But they're treated like they're at the top of the chain. And they do the least work with the patient. They meet them for 10 or 15 minutes once a week in outpatient. And say, are your meds? Your meds are good? Need a change? Okay, we'll see you next week. Blah, blah, blah. Not real work. Okay. That angers me about institutional America, that the people doing the real work aren't compensated. That's one thing. But also the fact that we give them so much credence when really it's the lifesavers in the trenches that are making the real shit, the real recovery happen. So don't give up, man. God bless you that you're doing the field and you're in recovery trying to help. And that don't get burned out. Don't get mad at the system to the point where you give up and get burned out and leave, because we need you. We need people who have a heart like you do. But I would caution you strongly that you cannot let it affect your program. Don't let that resentment build to the point where you just get inside and start getting thirsty. We've got to be very careful about that. So my main message to you is call the few guys you trust the most over the next week and just say, I've been in trouble. I'm in trouble. Help me out. Talk to me a little bit. And they'll get you in the back of the boat that fast. It's real simple. And I'd love to see you when you're in Louisville and talk to you at the meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to exchange more ideas. But Dan, I know you've heard me bitch about my little travels through the treatment center and all the crap I have to deal with, the bureaucracy. And, for those of you not in the know out there, your average therapist is spending way more time with a piece of paper and a computer than they are with a patient. And that's the state of healthcare in America today. We got to make sure all the boxes are filled out and everything is right by the lawyers. Otherwise, God forbid, if we don't want to help, no, patient care comes first. It doesn't seem like it. Patient care is not the priority. We got to make sure we're getting that money and keeping our license and all the other stuff. And it's just the nature of the beast. I get it. It's a necessary evil. If you don't have insurance paying for it, we can't have a treatment center. But God forbid, we should not be spending more time with paper than we do with clients. But any therapist working for an institution will tell you that's the reality of it. So, any thoughts?
Yeah. When I was real early in recovery, maybe even before I met you, when in them 4 years I was stumbling and bumbling down the halls, I asked about that because I was been to a treatment and they weren't like telling you the 12 steps. They weren't pointing you that direction outwardly. Now they brought meeting in and it was kind of like, hey, that's what you're supposed to do. We can't tell you that. And one of the techs that was in recovery gave, and I don't know that he knew what he was talking about. He was just trying to help me. And I asked that question to him, and he said, well, it gets kind of funny because we got to be careful that we're not promoting AA in here. Because of some, corporate baloney, they just kind of whispered about it. I've heard of people talking about going into treatment centers and, inpatient, and there's not a big book around. I still don't understand that. There's a piece of me that, it's almost like that anonymity thing we were talking about earlier. It's like, is like that tradition kind of tying things up that we can't promote Alcoholics Anonymous in our treatment centers or Narcotics Anonymous and that kind of thing. But everything else you talked about to him, I'm glad he's talked about it because I know who he is. And actually I have been having more contact with him over the last little while, back and forth texts and stuff like that. But sounds like it might need to be elevated to like maybe some phone calls and that to pat down that isolation a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I'm full I think the dude ought to get back here to Louisville. Of course, I know, again, like what we were talking, we have something very special, and that's another thing. When you lose that very special and you know you're losing it, it's a bit disheartening, and you're trying to look around, you're trying to find something that would at least a little bit compensate for what I walked away from, and not be able to find it. I can totally understand the struggle in that world.
So I've kind of seen the evolution of this. Again, we've talked about, and we won't make this too long because we're running long, but just stay with us, guys. Minnesota, there was a movement to bring the AA program into the treatment centers in the 70s and 80s, and I benefited from that, and Hazelden had a big piece of that. So thank God, because I wouldn't be here today if they didn't have that in there when I went to treatment. Then we went through this phase where it kind of fell out of favor, and the reason being is we need evidence-based treatment. Evidence-based treatment seemed to be the key phrase, and still is today. But now today we actually have evidence-based that AA and the 12 steps works. And if anybody wants to look up this video on YouTube, there's a video on YouTube by these British scientists where they did a meta-analysis of every single study that's ever been done on the efficacy of Alcoholics Anonymous. And guess what they find out? Your chances of staying sober are exponentially better with a sober support group and with the 12 steps and with that community than they are with any other method. And they compared it to private therapy. They compared it to one-on-one, group therapy. They compared it to going to other programs, and it's off the graph. So if it works, it works. And that's what I promote in my group. And I can back it up with real evidence, because how many people have I steered in the right direction and they're still sober today? And I know that I have a higher rate of recovery in my group than the average treatment center. So don't do it alone, guys. That's the main thing. And there are other ways to recover, I suppose, but they're goofy. Like, let's smoke pot and call it California sobriety. That is not recovery. That is not dealing with your issues. You're still getting high. So, choose your poison carefully. But I will tell you, look up on YouTube, British scientists, AA works, studies, blah, blah, blah. You'll find it easy enough. And it was fascinating, actually, to see that it's proven now. There's no longer any question. It's effective. So we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you for hanging with us. Sorry we ran a little late. This is kind of funny because Dan and I thought this would be a quick topic today. But see, he had to bring up a hot button, and Christopher had to respond, because that's what Christopher does. Anyway, we're really glad you're here with us today. Please come back. We love you, and we want to help support you. And every week we'll keep putting this out to give you a different topic to chew on to help you in your journey to grow and have the best life possible on this planet. So we'd like to close with the Serenity Prayer. If you'd like to join us, as we do in every meeting across the planet. Not every meeting they had in the fire, but it's a common thing. Dan, prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. We'll get through it one way or another. Come back and see us. We love you. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.